Okay, so I guess my question is, one of the things, I mean, I think these are pretty self-explanatory, but one of the things that I would like to see, and I don't know if this is you all or if this is more an internal discussion, is maybe categorizing these between, I hate to say, like, quick hit type things, maybe things that we can go after fairly quickly and less expensively, and then things that are much more longer term, and not necessarily keep them, what do I want to say, sectionalized, like, you know, I'm looking under the transportation plan, there's like 6 or 7 bullets, but maybe just a larger list that we could start working through.
So if I could just turn your attention to something that's in patients like that implementation action agenda.
Right.
That's really what you're referring to. You
Okay.
see a long list or a list.
Yep.
That's why that step is needed, because this is written in a way that's not quite that detailed.
Right.
And the analysis doesn't really take place at this stage necessarily. So that's the purpose of that action agenda.
Right.
And I
Okay.
see us doing that within the first few months after this is adopted. And then, you know, there's already some things that we've discussed doing within the next 2 years that are in this plan.
Mhm.
So, one thing that's on the draft budget tonight, there's some things in the draft budget tonight that directly implement, implement the plan. To begin to implement the plan.
And that'll be a kind of a staff-driven agenda, once this has been approved and moved forward. That's how that's created, as that action agenda, and then it obviously becomes a policy question, so I understand it's at both sides of it, but how's that process begin and stuff?
Actually, what we will be doing, and the mayor and I talked about having a policy setting workshop with council, kind of having a retreat where we talk about the policy issues, we list them, and kind of ask you all to prioritize, because as Dan's indicated, there are a couple of hundred things in here.
Right.
So what we're going to be doing is coming to you and asking you to kind of prioritize those policy issues that you want us to look at immediately, and those that you want to kind of delay. So we'll be working with you through a policy setting workshop
Right.
to determine what we should look at immediately.
And we'll find out several of those will almost lend themselves to one another, where there'll be a stepped process where
Correct.
step 1 will lend itself necessarily to step 2, so we'll be able to weed through that, I guess.
I mean, I guess as I was reading through here, I mean, there's some of them that seem pretty, I don't want to say they wouldn't cost anything, but they wouldn't seem as significant, and maybe some changes. I mean, one of them's like the utilize stormwater detention basins as landscaping features. You know, things like that I feel like we should be able to incorporate fairly quickly into some of our stuff and start making a difference, rather than waiting for 6 months to have a big discussion about it.
So I think, I'd like to tell people there are probably 3 different general categories of implementing plans. One of those is by funding public projects, capital projects. Another one is by adopting new regulations. And another one is by, through decisions that are made with land use applications.
Right.
That, you know, as we review land use applications, one of the findings for, say, a rezone or conditional use permit or special use permit is essentially the comprehensive plan. And that's how you implement some of these. That's one way of implementing these things directly. And that would begin as soon as the plan is adopted, as we receive applications.
There you go, question?
One thing that kind of struck me is surprising, I guess. On page 26, it talks about the retail and commercial markets. It lists 4 different types of commercial development that we are undersupplied by. And I mean, are these categories and these numbers, do they come from just an algorithm that says, based on this population and this disposable income, this is and how far the 156 people are, or 156,000 people, I think is, 158,000 people are. I mean, it's just, I guess it's hard for me to believe. I guess, well, in one case, gasoline stations, there was an article in the Kansas City Star not too long ago that Gardner's got some of the cheapest gas in Johnson County because there's an oversupply. supply of gas stations, and to the tune of 10 cents a gallon difference in some cases. And then as far as furniture stores, I mean, it's hard to believe, I mean, Nebraska Furniture Mart is, I mean, I can understand if this were somewhere on the East Coast or something like that, but here, at Nebraska Furniture Mart, it'd be tough for me to say, yeah, go create another furniture store in
Yeah.
Gardner, Kansas, we already have one, too.
And it's really, it's looking at the market area, so the market area extends beyond the geographic boundaries of the city. So it's really looking when these numbers are being analyzed. We use Esri Business Analyst, which is a national, there's a few different demographers and sources of data like this, and they're constantly mining data on supply and demand. And it's being balanced against the average expenditures of a consumer within a defined market area versus the supply for those particular categories. So the numbers tell one story. To go in further depth, and I know you had the economic development study that was done kind of in conjunction with this, but you want to look at what the existing supply is, what the access is, what the physical conditions are to create the environment for a retail use. And it's not just unique just to the city of Gardner. As I said, if somebody is looking for a potential development, they're not just looking there, they're looking within that market area. So it's really just to give some context to, overall the market is defined as being saturated, given the supply and demand. Here are some things that popped out that are market viable within a market area, but it would require, having the sites available and having the ability to accommodate that, and that's everything from traffic counts to access to exposure. So it really does require another level of creating the environment to accommodate these needs, but based on pure numbers, this is what the numbers are saying.
I just can't imagine a 26,000 square foot furniture store, I mean, that's the size of Dollar General or something. I mean, that's a space-intensive use, and
Yeah.
to generate $10 million in sales off, I mean, it just blows my mind. Maybe it's...
And if there were other users, and a lot of times these uses, they won't come into an area unless there's some other, another catalyst there or another development that's complementary. So if you had those other uses there, you might start to see, the potential there. But again, emphasizing that it's the market area of which Gardner sits in that defines that number.
More, Mary? I've got a couple questions. One of them is just talking about the land use plan, and when you start talking about low-density residential, it turns out we've got something on the agenda this evening regarding oil drilling on the property in the furthest northwest corner of the city. And, is it in the best interest of the city to let that remain agricultural and drill oil wells out there, or is that best used for low-density residential, which pretty much paints not just the northwest corner, but parcels around it?
Mm-hmm.
Before we interject, with respect to any discussion on this specific application, those are supposed to be held at the public meeting in which they're noticed. Certainly a general discussion about planning and oil wells and things like that are okay, but any particular discussion about a specific parcel, I think we need to steer clear of that.
Okay. And I would say,
Thank you, Ryan.
generally, there's a policy decision, but, this area of the city is, characterized as being low-density residential. So I'm trying to be careful, cognizant of what you're saying here versus how the plan does address these issues, particularly dealing with the oil wells and separately the growth of residential development in this area.
And maybe I can rephrase a little bit, but, we've got a big patch of yellow on the land use plan, the proposal.